Hello, everybody, and welcome to the series premiere of Villains Month here on the channel. Today, I'm going to start off Villains Month by talking about my favorite Spider-Man villains of all time. Before I do, please hit that subscribe button if you want to stay tuned for more of my content. Anyways, also, I want to give a huge honorable mention to Eddie Brock, who for quite some time was a big villain of Spider-Man. Now, he's more of a respected ally of Spider-Man. Now he's the new King of Black. He's really grown and developed and progressed as a character, and I really like that a lot. So yeah, Eddie Brock gets an honorable mention because, after all, he did start off his career as a big-time villain of Spider-Man. The first guy I want to talk about is L. Thompson Lincoln, aka Tombstone, aka the Big Man of Crime from the Big Man of Crime from the Spectacular Spider-Man animated series. Tombstone's probably one of the more badass yet underrated, underappreciated street-level villains in the entire Marvel Comics franchise. He's given not only Spider-Man a pretty good rivalry, but also the likes of Daredevil, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist. He's a really cool character, Tombstone. I think his backstory is really interesting. I mean, he grew up an acquaintance of Robbie Robertson, was bullied a lot because he was the only African American albino in his neighborhood, and he eventually realized that while he was the tallest and the strongest of all the kids in the neighborhood, he eventually turned to a life of crime. Eventually became one of New York's top hitmen. However, one day while in an altercation with Robbie Robertson, he got trapped in a testing chamber, got exposed to an experimental gas, gave him a pretty impressive superhuman physical conditioning, and made him even more dangerous. So yeah, there's that. Next up is Maxwell Dillon, aka Electro, one of the most powerful villains in not only in Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery, but in the entire Marvel Comics franchise. I mean, simply because of his ability to control, manipulate, and project various forms of electricity. I mean, he became Electro when he got struck by a bolt of lightning while working on electrical wires. Which it sounds cheesy, but hey, this is comic books. And, he's a fan favorite and he's a good character. Next up is the Rhino. Classic, typical muscle-bound villain. Like him a lot. Next up is Cletus Cassidy, aka Carnage, the symbiotic offspring of Venom. Uh, for those who do not know what inspired his creation, was DC's own clown prince of crime, the Joker. And look at the Carnage; he has some similarities to the Joker, i.e., he's unpredictable and he's batshit freaking crazy. That's the best way I can explain it to you guys. He's free. Other thing is, he's a bloodthirsty psychopath. The Joker is just an agent of chaos and destruction. Let's see, who else? Oh yeah, William Baker, aka Flint Marko, aka the Sandman. He's a really good character. Been a fan of his for a very long time. Um, his origin and backstory is really cool in my opinion. He's one of the more powerful villains in Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery due to the fact that he's a sand elemental, which I think is really cool and interesting. I know for a period of time he did reform, became a reserve member of the Avengers and a member of Silver Sable's Wild Pack. But after an altercation with Venom, he eventually went back into villainy, which I think is really interesting. But it's really interesting. He's a real cool character. Next up is Hydro Man. The water elemental character. I mean, he too has been a thorn in Spider-Man's side for a very long time. I've always liked Hydro Man. I think he's a really cool character too. So yeah, him as well. Let's see, what other Spider-Man villain do I like? Oh yes, Mr. Negative. Now, his real name in the comics is a mystery. He went by the yells of Martin Lee, but that turned out to be a ruse. His real name is a mystery, but he's a really cool character. He's really not really that much of a sympathetic character in the comics like he is in the Insomniac Spider-Man games. He is a pure evil piece of shit. Not that he's a bad character, but he's a pure evil douchebag. And, he wants to take over the underworld in New York City. Love his powers, love his abilities, love his character design. I think he's just a really cool character. The next up is a villain that made, even though he's also a villain of Daredevil and the Punisher, he made his very first appearance in the Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, issue number 50, was created by Stan Lee and John Romita Sr., and I'm talking about the fattest man of crime, as Spider-Man loves to call him, Wilson Fisk, a.k.a. the Kingpin. Now, trying to think. Been a fan since the 1994 Spider-Man animated series, in which he was voiced by the late and creator Roscoe Lee Brown. Love the Kingpin. To me, I think he's the greatest crime boss in not only in the Marvel Universe, but in all comics and fiction. I think he's the GOAT when it comes to being a crime boss in the superhero genre. Um, Oh, another honorable mention I want to point out is Dr. Curtis Connors, aka the Lizard. I don't really consider the Lizard to be a true Spider-Man villain, but more so as a foil to the character. Like, yeah, he has been antagonist, but he's not really a true villain of Spider-Man. You know, his alter ego, Kurt Connors, is a good man, a good family man, a good scientist that tried to regrow his arm with reptile DNA, but of course, in his comics, things don't go really well. Became a humanoid lizard monster. So, I love the Lizard. Been a fan since the '94 Spider-Man animated series. I think he's a tremendous character. I really, truly, honestly believe that. I think he is a tremendous character, and hopefully he gets redeemed. Hopefully he gets done better sometime in the future on the big screen. The next character on the now back to the list. Um, Shocker's pretty cool. I mean, I know the Shocker seems like a silly name, but he's a really formidable character. And, I know I know he comes across like a silly character because of his character design, but he is a pretty cool villain. His gauntlets are very formidable. They're capable of doing pretty good damage on certain people. So, Herman Schultz is a pretty interesting villain pretty cool villain in my opinion. The next villain on this list is, get to him momentarily. Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, of course, Spider-Man's supposed arch rival, legendary villain, Roderick Kingsley, the Hobgoblin. Love him. I actually like him a bit more than the Green Goblin. I know there's some people that maybe seem a bit crazy, but hey, this is my opinion. I really do like his character quite a bit, but I definitely do have a respect and pretty good of respect for the Green Goblin. Um, Before I get to him, I want to see if there's any other films that I like. Oh yes, Hammerhead. Guy that talks and dresses like a 1920s, 1930s mobster and gangster. Has a really strong, durable skull because I think he has like a metallic skull or something because he got severely injured really bad back in the day. Um, Always liked Hammerhead. Always thought he was a cool character. Granted, he's a bit silly, but he's a cool character. Now, I'm going to conclude this video by talking about my number one favorite Spider-Man villain of all time. And that is the world's greatest hunter, Sergei Kravenov, aka Kraven the Hunter. He is one of Spider-Man's most dangerous and deadliest foes for a reason. The Calypso serum that he ingested years ago gave him a superhuman conditioning, greater than the one that turned Steve Rogers into Captain, the Super Soldier Serum that turned Steve Rogers to Captain America. Granted, his physical abilities aren't exactly on par with Spider-Man, but it's capable of contending with contending with him. He's a phenomenal hand-to-hand fighter. He's a phenomenal strategist and tactician, marksman, tracker, you name it. He's a badass. He's a guy you don't want to cross paths with. He's a very, very, very dangerous man. Been a fan since the 1994 Spider-Man animated series. Obviously, that version of Kraven is different, but I became a fan of him through that series. Alright, y'all, that is it for this episode 1 of Villains Month. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.